So we start with the news that a 21-year-old US Air Force National Guard has been arrested over the leak of classified Pentagon documents on the website Discord.
The US President Joe Biden was briefed about Mr Teixeira's arrest whilst on a trip to Ireland, after he said he was not concerned over the breach of security.
Well, ahead of his final day in Ireland, the President also spoke of his pride in his Irish roots and support for the peace process in Northern Ireland, saying the UK government should be working closer with the island of Ireland.
Well, joining us this morning to discuss this all is the editor of CapX, John Ashmore. Good morning to you, John. Great to have you with us. So let's start, shall we, with that worrying news of the leaking of classified Pentagon documents. Now, we know that 21-year-old suspect has been arrested, but bring us up to date. What do we know so far?
Yeah, as you said, it's all fairly fresh. There was some quite bizarre scenes of the police going and getting him from his house it's just south of Boston, where he comes from. And yeah, he's only a 21-year-old guy who apparently posted this information in a kind of online chat group with what's described in the reports as a group of young men. It's slightly reminiscent of, you might remember, or viewers might remember, the case of Bradley Manning, or Chelsea Manning, as she's now known, about a decade ago, doing something similar with classified information. And from what I've read from people who know him and so on, they will say things like, "Oh, he's just a quiet kid. He's not a troublemaker. He doesn't have any particular kind of animus against the government or anything like that." So it's all really quite unclear. At the moment, it sounds like kind of a young person who's done something very, very stupid that is probably going to affect the rest of their lives. But it's pretty early days.
How damaging is this, not only to the United States, but also to her allies, with some of the information that's come out?
Yeah, I think it's very damaging. It strikes you as bizarre that someone so young could have access to classified information, someone who'd only been with the National Guard for 2 years, I believe, and B, that they could leak it so seemingly very relatively easily in just an online forum or an app, as you said in the lead-in. So yeah, it doesn't inspire a huge amount of confidence. We see this kind of thing all the time, though, don't we? I mean, we see it here with leaks of data being left on trains and things like that. It makes you realise that despite this enormous, vast infrastructure, particularly the defence establishment in the US, that very basic kind of human errors or one bad apple can leak really important stuff remarkably easily.
I mean, Joe Biden has been reacting to this in Ireland, where he is at the moment. He says he's not concerned about the leak as it doesn't compromise intelligence of great consequence, he says. But this is reputational damage, isn't it, for the US with their allies?
Yeah, I think there's an element of the old Mandy Rice Davis quote. He would say that, wouldn't he? You're not going to go out and say, "Oh, this is terrible. This is really important information that's been leaked." I can't see how it is anything, like you say, anything other than very bad for the United States reputation. Particularly if you looked at some of the stuff that came out earlier this week, the battle plans for Ukraine. It gave a very clear idea to the Russians what the states have been surveilling, where they had been surveilling, and the kind of information they held. And I can't see how that's anything but very useful to the other side. So, yeah, Joe Biden might be putting a brave face on it, but it strikes me as a very damaging development.
In terms of President Biden, what are we to make of his visit, his trip so far? Because you have to say, amidst all the positives and benefits of a visit by a sitting president, this does seem to have been gaffe-prone and, dare we say, slightly anti-British.
There's certainly felt like an element of that. There often has with Biden. It's not the first time. There was an off-the-cuff thing a year or so ago where he went, he said something like, "I don't like the English because I'm Irish," and then laughed it off. I find it all slightly ridiculous. I mean, we have this kind of trope of Americans constantly claiming they're Irish, but this goes back sort of 7 or 8 generations, and he's going on about how he's home, but it's his, great-great-great-grandfather or something who left Ireland. and Biden is an English surname, as he kept pointing out in his speech the other day. But yeah, I mean, the gaffes, there was one about them not flying the Union Jack on their car when they're in Northern Ireland, implying that Biden somehow doesn't think it's actually part of the UK. The one that really struck me was when he was in Dundalk and he said, "I don't know why my relatives left here," which for someone who's apparently so obsessed with Ireland to not remember that there was a famine in the 1840s seems like a bit of a memory slip there. But yeah, I mean, generally he plays up to this whole idea that's very popular in the States of associating very strongly with the old country and going on about his Irish roots. Personally, I find that whole thing slightly tedious, but I'm loath to read too much into it in terms of kind of American British-UK relations. I think his administration has had a fairly solid kind of Atlanticist outlook. It's been pretty orthodox in policy. They've followed the same line on us over Ukraine, for example. So I wouldn't be too worried about the relationship between the two countries. I think he's very sentimental about Ireland, and he loves Irish poetry and that kind of thing.
Yes, I mean, he is very, very proud of his Irishness. That's been clear in the past 4 or so days. There was a lot of focus on his words in Northern Ireland when he spent just a day in Belfast. But the Democratic Unionist chief, Jeffrey Donaldson, he did say he appreciated the president's measured and balanced remarks. We did seem to do quite well with the DUP. Do you think they will be persuaded by the prospect of billions of dollars worth of US investment if power sharing is restored?
Yeah, I thought that was one line I thought stuck out in his speech, actually. It felt like he was sort of dangling a carrot out to the parties in Northern Ireland. But I don't think it'll make much difference to either Unionists or Nationalists in the Assembly, or what should be the Assembly, whether or not that's there, because the differences between them run quite deep, and the problems with the protocol, even after the Windsor framework, are quite kind of are very long-standing and technical. And you know, the temptation of billions of dollars investment doesn't change the fact for Unionists that there is still effectively a kind of border down the United Kingdom, and that is their big gripe that hasn't changed. In general, though, I thought his speech in Northern Ireland was very well balanced. It didn't sound, despite all his sentimentality about being Irish, it didn't sound as if he favoured one community over the other. It was a very unifying message, and it was a message about what Northern Ireland is today, 25 years on from the peace process. He wasn't, harking back to a different version of the country. So I actually thought it was quite a good speech. I think I'm wary of overblowing his supposed anti-Britishness. And I think, yeah, generally speaking, it's been a reasonably positive visit from that point of view.
John, really good to see you this morning. Thanks very much.